On July 14, 2023, the Carter family, Jim, Melissa, and their 15-year-old daughter Ellie set out on a fishing trip in the remote waters of Alaska. The Carters were an adventurous family from Anchorage who enjoyed spending their weekends exploring Alaska's untamed wilderness. Jim, 47, was an experienced fisherman who had spent much of his life navigating Alaska's rivers and inlets. Melissa, 43, shared his love for the outdoors, and together they had passed on this passion to Ellie, who had grown up learning about wildlife and survival skills. The family's small motorboat, Summerwind, was their pride and joy. It had carried them on countless fishing trips, providing them opportunities to bond and create cherished memories. That summer morning, they had planned to venture to a secluded inlet known for its rich salmon runs. Jim had visited the inlet a few times before, and its isolation and beauty made it the perfect spot for a peaceful day on the water. The day began as planned. The weather was clear, the air crisp, and the water calm. The Carters laughed and talked as they cast their fishing lines, enjoying the moment's serenity. Ellie, who had recently developed a knack for fishing, was especially eager to catch her first big salmon. The family worked together to reel in a few good catches, their spirits high as they admired the stunning Alaskan wilderness. Unbeknownst to them, danger was nearby. A large grizzly bear was feasting on a salmon caught along the shore. The powerful predator was focused on its meal, but remained alert to its surroundings. As the Carters drifted closer to the shoreline, their boat's quiet motor and movement startled the bear. Feeling cornered and threatened, the grizzly began to show signs of aggression, pacing and growling as it watched the boat approach. The Carters noticed the bear and decided to back away, but it was too late. Sensing the intrusion, the grizzly charged into the water with alarming speed. The massive animal's presence was both terrifying and surreal. Before the Carters could react, the bear reached the boat, rising on its hind legs and swiping at the motor with claws. The force of the attack punctured the ship's side, causing it to rock violently. Melissa clung to Ellie as the boat began to take on water. Jim tried to stabilize the vessel, but the damage was severe. The bear struck the ship again, this time clawing through the hull. The Summerwind capsized, tossing the family into the icy waters. The cold was shocking, stealing their breath as they scrambled to stay afloat. As the bear retreated to the shore, the Carters struggled to gather their bearings in the freezing water. Hypothermia began to set in as they fought to survive. They managed to crawl onto a nearby rocky shoreline, shivering and terrified. The family's ordeal was far from over, as they realized they had no shelter, fire, or means to signal for help. The rocky shoreline offered little comfort to the Carters as they huddled together, their soaked clothes clinging to their skin and the cold biting through their bones. The icy Alaskan waters had already begun to take a toll on their bodies. Hypothermia was setting in, with their shivering becoming more intense. Melissa tried to keep Ellie close, using her body heat to warm her daughter, while Jim scanned the area for any sign of the bear. The grizzly had returned to the forest, but its proximity still posed a threat. The family knew they needed to move to higher ground. The shoreline was exposed, and the rising tide could trap them. Jim led the way, his legs weak and trembling from the cold, while Melissa and Ellie followed closely. The jagged rocks slowed their progress, and every step felt heavier as their strength faded. Despite the challenges, they pushed on, knowing that staying in one place could be even more dangerous. As dawn began to break, the faint light revealed the cliffs ahead. The Carters knew they had to climb to safety. The incline was slippery, and their frozen hands struggled to grip the rocks. Melissa stumbled, scraping her knee, but Jim helped her regain her footing. Ellie, though exhausted, refused to give up, determined to keep moving despite her fear and pain. Reaching the top of the cliff was a moment of relief. The higher ground offered protection, and they could see further into the inlet. Jim waved his jacket in the air, hoping to signal for help. Melissa joined him, and their combined efforts created a faint but visible movement against the backdrop of the forest. Hours passed, and their energy waned. The cold had drained them, and their hope was beginning to fade. Then, in the distance, the low hum of an engine broke the silence. A float plane appeared, its silver body glinting in the morning light. The Carters waved frantically, their movements fueled by a final surge of desperation. The pilot spotted them, circling once before descending to land on the water. The rescuers acted quickly, helping the family onto the plane and providing them with blankets and warm fluids. Although their bodies were weak, and Melissa showed signs of frostbite, they were alive. The flight back to the nearest town was quiet. The family was too drained to speak, but they were grateful to be safe. The Carters reflected on their narrow escape after the ordeal. The attack had destroyed their motorboat, and their close encounter with the grizzly bear reminded them of the unpredictable dangers of Alaska's wilderness. Despite the trauma, their bond as a family grew stronger. Jim vowed to prepare even better for future trips, ensuring they had the tools and knowledge to face whatever challenges might come. On July 15, 2023, Sarah Jenkins and Mark Thompson embarked on a horseback riding trip through a national forest in western Wyoming. The couple, both in their late 20s, shared a deep love for the outdoors and often explored wilderness trails during their weekends. Sarah, an elementary school teacher, had grown up in Wyoming and spent much of her childhood horseback riding across the region's vast landscapes. Originally from Colorado, Mark worked as an environmental consultant and often accompanied Sarah on her adventures, learning to ride and appreciate the area's rugged beauty. This particular afternoon was idyllic. The sun shone brightly, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees as the couple guided their horses along a trail that meandered through the forest. They chose this path because it was known for its stunning views and occasional sightings of deer and elk. Sarah rode a chestnut mare named Bella, while Mark was on a sturdy black gelding named Rocky. The couple enjoyed the serenity of the forest, and the soft crunch of hooves on the trail added rhythm to their journey. As they rode deeper into the wilderness, the trail narrowed, flanked by dense undergrowth on either side. The couple chatted quietly, unaware they were venturing close to a grizzly bear's territory. The forest was alive with sounds, from birds chirping to the distant rustle of leaves, but neither Sarah nor Mark suspected any danger. As they rounded a bend in the trail, Bella suddenly stopped, her ears pricked forward. Sensing the horse's unease, Sarah tried to calm her, but a massive grizzly bear burst out of the underbrush before she could react. The bear, likely startled by the horses, stood on its hind legs, growling loudly. The sudden appearance of the predator sent both horses into a frenzy. The mare reared up before Sarah could steady Bella, throwing her off the saddle. Sarah landed hard on the rocky ground, bruising her side and scraping her arms. Mark managed to keep his seat on Rocky, but his heart raced as he watched the bear charge toward Sarah. Bella bolted into the trees, leaving Sarah vulnerable on the trail. The bear lunged at Sarah, its massive frame towering over her as she tried to scramble away. Its claws raked across her leg, leaving deep gashes as she screamed in pain. Desperate to protect her, Mark spurred Rocky forward, positioning the horse between Sarah and the bear. He waved his arms and shouted, trying to divert the bear's attention. The grizzly turned toward Mark, its growls echoing through the forest. Sensing the danger, Rocky stomped and snorted, but the bear remained undeterred. Mark grabbed a branch from the ground, waving it frantically to fend off the animal. The distraction gave Sarah enough time to crawl a few feet away, clutching her injured leg as blood seeped through her jeans. The bear swiped at Mark's horse, grazing Rocky's side with its claws. The gelding reared up, forcing the bear to back off momentarily. Mark took the opportunity to yell at Sarah to move further away. Her leg injury made it nearly impossible for her to stand, and she crawled slowly toward the cover of a fallen tree. The bear's attention shifted back to Sarah as it paced the trail, growling and sniffing the air. Mark knew he had to act quickly to keep the predator from attacking again. His mind raced as he prepared to risk everything to protect Sarah. Mark's adrenaline surged as the grizzly turned its focus back to Sarah, who was still struggling to move further away. Her leg injury, combined with her bruises, made her movements slow and excruciatingly painful. The bear growled loudly, inching closer, its heavy paws crunching against the gravel path. Mark knew he needed to act decisively. He urged Rocky forward again, positioning the horse between the bear and Sarah. The gelding's loud snorts and stomping hooves momentarily distracted the bear. Mark grabbed another sturdy branch from the ground and waved it aggressively, shouting to scare the predator. The bear paused, clearly agitated but momentarily unsure of its next move. Sarah, still clutching her bleeding leg, managed to drag herself behind the fallen tree for cover. The deep gashes on her leg continued to bleed heavily, soaking her jeans and making her dizzy from blood loss. She fought to stay conscious, knowing Mark was risking his life to protect her. The bear finally retreated into the underbrush, but Mark knew it wasn't gone for good. He quickly dismounted Rocky and rushed to Sarah's side. Surveying her injuries, he realized the situation was critical. Her leg wounds were severe, and her pale complexion showed signs of shock. He tore strips of fabric from his shirt to create a makeshift bandage, tying it tightly around her leg to slow the bleeding. Mark gently helped Sarah onto his horse, ensuring she was securely seated in the saddle. Although Rocky had been injured earlier, the resilient horse stood steady, almost as if he understood the moment's gravity. With reins in hand, Mark led them into the forest, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Every rustling leaf and snapping twig sent a jolt of adrenaline through him, but he kept moving forward, resolute in their mission to reach safety before the bear could return. Mark noticed movement in the distance as they approached the main trail. The sounds of the commotion alerted a group of hikers who appeared. One of them carried a satellite phone and immediately called for help. Relief washed over Mark as the hikers assisted in keeping Sarah stable while they waited for the rescue team to arrive. When the helicopter finally landed in a clearing, paramedics rushed to Sarah's side. Her injuries required immediate attention, and she was airlifted to the nearest hospital. Mark stayed behind to ensure Rocky was safely cared for before being transported to reunite with Sarah. The following days were filled with recovery and reflection. Sarah underwent surgery to repair the damage to her leg, and doctors confirmed that she would need weeks of physical therapy. The scars on her leg would be a permanent reminder of the harrowing encounter. Despite the trauma, she remained optimistic, grateful to be alive, and deeply thankful for Mark's courage. Though physically unharmed, Mark struggled with the emotional toll of the incident. The image of the bear charging at Sarah haunted him, but he found solace in knowing he had done everything possible to protect her. Their bond grew stronger as they supported each other through the recovery process. The attack sparked widespread discussions in their community about the risks of outdoor activities in bear-populated areas. Local wildlife officials emphasized the importance of carrying bear spray, avoiding known bear territories, and staying vigilant during wilderness excursions. Sarah and Mark, now advocates for wilderness safety, shared their story to raise awareness about the dangers and unpredictability of wildlife encounters. While the scars of the attack remained, the couple found strength in their survival. The experience deepened their appreciation for life and each other, turning a near tragedy into a powerful story of resilience and love. On September 9th, 2023, 41-year-old veteran backpacker Sean Hayes set out on a solo trek through Wyoming's Wind River Range. Sean was a seasoned adventurer who had spent years exploring some of the most remote and challenging trails across North America. Known among his friends for his meticulous preparation and love for nature, Sean often sought solitude in the wilderness to reconnect with himself and the environment. His experience and careful planning had earned him respect within the hiking community. Sean had spent months preparing for this particular journey. With its jagged peaks, alpine lakes, and rugged beauty, the Wind River Range was one of the most challenging terrains he had ever attempted. He meticulously planned his route, packed enough supplies for a week, and informed close friends of his itinerary. With a durable pack, trekking poles, and survival gear, Sean felt ready to tackle the adventure. The first 2 days of his hike went smoothly. Sean navigated the winding trails, camped near pristine lakes, and marveled at the untouched wilderness around him. The weather was ideal, with clear skies and crisp air. As an experienced outdoorsman, he kept his senses alert, aware of the dangers of trekking in bear country. He carried bear spray, stored his food properly, and followed all the recommended precautions. On the morning of the third day, Sean entered a dense forest near a berry thicket. The area was quiet except for the rustling of leaves and the occasional bird call. As Sean rounded a bend in the trail, he suddenly froze. A massive grizzly bear and her cubs were feeding on berries ahead of him. His heart raced as he realized the danger he was in. Grizzlies fiercely protect their young, and Sean knows he has to act carefully to avoid provoking the animal. Slowly, Sean began to back away, keeping his eyes on the bear without direct eye contact. He held his trekking poles firmly, ready to use them if needed. The bear, sensing a threat to her cubs, lifted her head and began to growl. Sean's cautious retreat was not enough to calm the animal. The bear charged instantly, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. Sean tried to defend himself, using his trekking poles to create a barrier. The bear's immense power, however, was overwhelming. It struck him with a massive paw, knocking him off balance and tumbling down a rocky incline. Sean sustained serious injuries as he hit the jagged rocks below. Despite the pain, he tried to crawl away, hoping to distance himself from the bear, but the grizzly was relentless, turning its attention back to him as he struggled to move. As Sean lay at the bottom of the rocky incline, his body battered and bleeding, the grizzly bear charged again. The animal's powerful jaws clamped down on him, delivering another brutal attack. Sean suffered fatal injuries as the bear mauled him, leaving deep gashes across his torso and limbs. Despite his strength and experience, Sean could no longer fight back. His body was still, and the bear, sensing no further threat, retreated to her cubs near the berry thicket. The wilderness grew silent once more, the only sounds being the rustling of leaves and the occasional cry of a bird. Sean's backpack, torn and scattered, lay near his motionless body. The harsh reality of his final moments was a stark contrast to the beauty of the untouched landscape around him. Days passed before Sean's absence was noticed. His friends raised the alarm when he failed to check in as planned. Search and rescue teams were dispatched to the Wind River Range, their mission complicated by the rugged terrain and expansive wilderness. Experienced trackers and volunteers worked tirelessly, covering miles of trails and scanning the remote areas using drones. It took nearly 3 days before a search team encountered signs of Sean's struggle. His trekking poles, broken and bloodied, were found near the rocky slope where he had tried to defend himself. Following the disturbed earth and torn gear trail, they discovered his remains. Sean's body showed clear evidence of a fierce struggle, with deep wounds from the bear's claws and bites. The scene was both tragic and haunting, a stark reminder of the unforgiving power of nature. The news of Sean's death spread quickly, shaking the hiking and outdoor communities. Sean was a respected and admired adventurer, known for his careful preparation and love of the wild. His loss sparked conversations about the risks of solo travel in bear country and the importance of preparedness, even for seasoned backpackers. Wildlife experts emphasize the need to respect grizzly habitats, especially during sensitive times like late summer, when bears are focused on feeding. Sean's family and friends mourned his passing, remembering him as a man who lived fully and embraced the challenges of the natural world. They honored his memory by supporting organizations promoting wilderness, safety, and education. His tragic encounter was a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between humans and wildlife in shared spaces. On July 15, 2023, David and Rachel Parker, a couple from Denver, Colorado, set out on what they thought would be a memorable summer adventure in a national park in northwestern Montana. David, 39, was a history professor with a passion for nature photography, and Rachel, 37, was an elementary school teacher who loved hiking and exploring new trails. They had been married for 10 years and shared a deep appreciation for the outdoors. This trip was their way of celebrating their anniversary while reconnecting with the natural world. The couple meticulously planned their hike, choosing a popular trail for its scenic views and wildlife. David carried a high-end camera, eager to capture the park's rugged beauty, while Rachel packed snacks and water to keep them fueled for the journey. Both wore sturdy hiking boots and lightweight backpacks filled with essentials. The morning was perfect, clear skies, a gentle breeze, and birds chirping in the distance. They felt at ease, unaware of the danger that awaited them. The trail wound through dense forests and open meadows, offering breathtaking views of snow-capped peaks and crystal-clear lakes. Rachel led the way, pointing out wildflowers and occasionally admiring the scenery. David often stopped to take pictures, falling behind as he adjusted his camera settings to capture the perfect shot. The couple's laughter and conversation filled the air, a stark contrast to the stillness of the wilderness. As they ventured deeper into the park, they came across a secluded area near a stream shaded by towering pines. It was the ideal spot for a quick break, and David suggested taking some photos by the water. Rachel agreed, and they stepped off the main trail, unaware they were entering grizzly territory. David set up his camera on a tripod, while Rachel explored the surrounding area, marveling at the beauty of the untouched landscape. The tranquility was shattered when a rustling sound came from the underbrush. Rachel froze, her heart racing, as she spotted a massive grizzly bear emerging from the thicket. Startled by their presence, the bear stood on its hind legs, its dark eyes locking onto the couple. David quickly grabbed his camera, thinking he could capture a rare wildlife moment, but the bear's growl sent a chilling warning. Rachel instinctively backed away, urging David to do the same, but David focused on adjusting his lens and moved closer to get a better angle. The bear's growl grew louder, and within seconds it charged. David barely had time to react as the bear swiftly closed the distance. The bear knocked him to the ground, its powerful claws tearing into his back, causing deep lacerations. Rachel screamed, dropping her backpack as she ran toward the trail, desperate to find help. Rachel's footsteps echoed in her ears as she sprinted toward the trail, her mind racing with fear and panic. Behind her, she could still hear the growls and roars of the bear, mixed with David's cries of pain. She glanced back briefly, only to see the massive creature looming over David, who was struggling beneath its weight. The bear's claws continued to rake across his back and arms, leaving deep wounds as he tried to shield himself. Desperate for help, Rachel pushed herself harder, her legs trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. Rachel spotted a group of hikers a few hundred yards down the trail. She waved her arms, shouting to get their attention. The group, alarmed by her frantic state, immediately grabbed their bear spray and ran toward the sounds of the attack. Rachel collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath as she pointed them in the right direction. The hikers arrived just as the bear was preparing to strike again. They quickly formed a line, aiming their bear spray at the animal. The first burst of the spray was missed due to the wind, but the second shot hit the bear directly in the face. Stunned and disoriented, the bear growled one final time before retreating into the dense forest. The hikers cautiously approached David, who lay motionless on the ground. David was alive but severely injured. His back and arms were covered in deep lacerations, and his breathing was shallow from the trauma. One of the hikers, a nurse, immediately began administering first aid, using a clean shirt to apply pressure to the wounds and slow the bleeding. Another hiker used their satellite phone to call for emergency assistance. Within 30 minutes, a rescue helicopter arrived, guided by the group's bright clothing and frantic waving. Paramedics carefully lifted David onto a stretcher and secured him in the helicopter. Rachel climbed aboard, holding David's hand as they were airlifted to the nearest hospital. Doctors at the hospital worked tirelessly to stabilize David. He required surgery to repair torn muscles and deep wounds, and he lost a significant amount of blood. Despite the severity of his injuries, David was declared stable after several hours in the operating room. The incident sparked widespread attention, with park officials stating the importance of staying on marked trails and carrying proper safety equipment. New policies were implemented to limit access to areas with high bear activity, and educational programs were launched to teach visitors how to navigate the wilderness safely. For David and Rachel, the attack was a life-altering event. David faced a long recovery process, both physically and emotionally, but he remained grateful to be alive. Rachel, who had acted swiftly to get help, became an advocate for wildlife safety, sharing their story to raise awareness. The couple, though shaken, found strength in each other as they began to heal from the traumatic experience. On September 8, 2023, Hank Doyle, a seasoned logger with over 2 decades of experience, ventured into the remote forests of Montana to inspect a new work site. Hank was well known in his small logging community in Missoula, Montana, for his hard work, practical skills, and deep respect for nature. At 48 years old, Hank had spent most of his life working in some of the state's densest and most rugged forests. His familiarity with the wild often made him the first choice for challenging assignments in isolated locations. Logging was more than just a job for Hank. It was a way of life that connected him to the environment while providing for his family. Despite the dangers, Hank embraced the challenges, carrying out his work precisely and carefully. He had an unshakable belief in his ability to handle any situation, even in the unpredictable wilderness. That belief, however, would be tragically tested on this fateful day. Hank set out early in the morning with his trusted chainsaw, a well-worn tool he relied on for every job. He planned to scout the work site and ensure the area was safe for the rest of the crew. The forest was thick with towering pines and undergrowth, and the air was crisp with the lingering scent of pine needles. As he walked deeper into the woods, Hank's boots crunched on the uneven forest floor, and his mind focused on assessing potential hazards like unstable trees and loose rocks. By mid-afternoon, Hank had reached a dense section of forest near a berry patch, a common wildlife area. As he moved closer, he unknowingly startled a grizzly bear feeding nearby. The bear, caught off guard, immediately sensed danger and turned its attention toward Hank. Grizzlies are known for their territorial behavior, and this one was no exception. Hank froze as the massive animal locked eyes with him. He understood the seriousness of the situation and began to back away slowly, avoiding sudden movements. Despite his efforts, the bear lowered its head and charged, closing the distance between them in seconds. With no firearm to defend himself, Hank gripped his chainsaw, the only tool at his disposal. He quickly started the engine, the roar of the machine cutting through the forest. As the grizzly closed in, Hank swung the chainsaw in defense, the blade catching the bear's shoulder and causing a deep wound. The bear, now injured, roared in pain and anger, its rage intensifying. Despite the injury, the grizzly's size and strength were overwhelming. It lunged at Hank, knocking him off his feet. Hank sustained fatal injuries as the bear overpowered him, its claws and teeth causing devastating wounds. The struggle left the forest floor littered with broken branches and torn ground as the bear finally retreated into the woods, its injured shoulder bleeding heavily. Hank's chainsaw, still running, lay beside him, a haunting symbol of his desperate fight. His body remained motionless, the dense forest falling silent once again. When Hank failed to return the next morning, his co-workers grew concerned. Hank was known for his punctuality and thoroughness, and his absence was out of character. By midday, a small search party was organized to trace his steps. The team, equipped with radios and basic gear, entered the forest following the path Hank had taken the previous day. As they approached the area near the berry patch, one of the searchers noticed the faint hum of an engine in the distance. It was Hank's chainsaw still running, the sound guiding them to the scene. What they found was devastating. Hank's body lay motionless on the forest floor, surrounded by evidence of a fierce struggle. His injuries were severe, with claw marks and deep wounds across his torso and arms. The ground was disturbed, bearing the signs of the grizzly's violent attack and Hank's desperate attempt to defend himself. The scene painted a grim picture of the encounter. The chainsaw, which had injured the bear, still lay beside Hank, a testament to his bravery and quick thinking. Despite his efforts, the grizzly's power and aggression were too much to overcome. The search party radioed for help, their voices heavy with sorrow as they relayed the news to the base. Authorities and wildlife rangers arrived later that afternoon to secure the area and investigate. The bear's tracks were visible, leading deeper into the forest. Based on the injuries and the scene, rangers concluded that Hank's defensive actions with the chainsaw likely saved future lives, forcing the bear to retreat before it could cause further harm. The rangers tracked the injured bear over the next 2 days. They found it near a stream, its wounded shoulder confirming that it was the same animal. To prevent further incidents, the bear was euthanized. This incident sparked discussions about human-wildlife conflicts and the responsibilities of working in bear country. It also highlighted the need for better safety protocols and equipment for those working in remote wilderness areas. Hank's death sent shockwaves through his community. He was remembered as a skilled professional who respected the forest and its inhabitants. His sacrifice became a somber reminder of nature's unpredictable dangers. Colleagues and friends shared stories of his dedication, describing him as a man who never hesitated to put himself in harm's way for the safety of others. In the following weeks, local organizations and forestry companies worked together to implement stronger safety measures for loggers in bear-prone regions. These included mandatory bear deterrent training and providing better protective equipment. Hank's story also became a cautionary tale for others, urging those venturing into the wild always to be prepared and vigilant. Hank's family took comfort in knowing his actions likely prevented others from encountering the same fate. Though his life ended tragically, his bravery and determination left a lasting impact, ensuring that his legacy would live on through improved safety practices and heightened awareness of the risks posed by the wilderness. On August 12, 2023, 4 friends from Seattle, Lisa Howard, Ben Carter, Mark Davis, and Julia Thompson, set out on a long-planned camping adventure to Alaska's remote Kenai Peninsula. This trip was their way of escaping the stress of their daily lives and reconnecting with nature. Lisa, 27, a school teacher, was the group planner. She meticulously researched the trails and campgrounds. Ben, 29, a firefighter, was the group's protector, always ready to handle emergencies. Mark, 28, a software engineer, loved adventure but often underestimated risks. Julia, 26, a nurse, was the calm presence who kept everyone grounded. The group arrived at the Kenai Peninsula in the early afternoon. The drive had been long, but the sight of the dense forests and majestic mountains made it worthwhile. They found a secluded spot near a small river to set up camp. The area was known for its stunning views and abundant wildlife. They pitched their tents, set up a small fire pit, and shared stories about their adventures. The day was peaceful. Mark tried his hand at fishing while Julia and Lisa explored the nearby trails, collecting wildflowers and taking pictures. Ben kept busy chopping wood for the campfire. As the sun set, the group gathered around the fire, enjoying roasted marshmallows and discussing their plans for the next day. Laughter echoed through the forest, but they made a critical mistake in their excitement. They left food scraps outside their tents, unknowingly inviting danger. Night fell, and the forest became eerily quiet. The only sounds were the crackling of the dying fire and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As the friends settled into their tents, They felt excitement and tranquility, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Around midnight, a loud crashing sound jolted them awake. Lisa was the first to peek out of her tent. Her heart sank as she saw a massive brown bear rummaging through their campsite. The bear, drawn by the scent of food, was tearing through their belongings with alarming force. Lisa quickly alerted the others, and panic set in. Ben grabbed a flashlight to protect the group and cautiously exited his tent. He hoped the light would scare the bear away, but the animal turned its attention to him. The bear growled and charged, knocking Ben to the ground. The bear's claws tore into his side, leaving deep gashes as he tried to shield himself. The others screamed, scrambling to find a way to help. Lisa found the bear spray in their supplies and hurriedly instructed Mark and Julia to stay back. She aimed the spray at the bear with trembling hands, hoping to drive it away. Lisa took a deep breath and aimed the bear spray directly at the massive animal. The mist hit the bear's face, causing it to retreat momentarily. The bear growled and shook its head, agitated but hesitant to advance further. Mark and Julia rushed to Ben, who was still on the ground, groaning in pain. Ben's side was covered in deep gashes, and his breathing was labored, but he was conscious. They carefully dragged him away from the bear, while Lisa held her ground, spraying the animal to keep it at bay. The bear hesitated, growled again, and then lumbered back into the forest. The group stood frozen for a moment, listening to the sound of the bear retreating into the darkness. The tension lingered, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. Julia quickly assessed Ben's injuries with their limited first aid supplies. His wounds were bleeding heavily, and he showed signs of shock. They applied pressure to the worst cuts and wrapped him in a sleeping bag to keep him warm. The group knew they couldn't stay at the campsite. The bear could return at any moment, and Ben's condition worsened. They decided to pack up as much as they could and leave immediately. Mark and Lisa worked quickly, gathering essentials while Julia stayed with Ben, reassuring him and monitoring his condition. The adrenaline pushed them to act swiftly despite their fear and exhaustion. They decided to head toward the trailhead, which was several miles away. With no cell service and no way to call for help, they fashioned a makeshift stretcher using tent poles and their jackets to carry Ben. The journey was grueling. The uneven terrain and darkness made every step a challenge. Lisa led the way with a flashlight, scanning for any signs of the bear, while Mark and Julia took turns carrying the stretcher. Hours passed as they navigated through the dense forest. The group was exhausted, but they couldn't afford to stop. Ben's condition remained critical, and they knew they had to reach safety before his injuries worsened. The thought of the bear stalking them from the shadows added to their anxiety, but they pressed on, driven by the determination to save their friend. As dawn broke, the group finally reached the trailhead where they flagged down a passing vehicle. The driver immediately called for emergency services, and within minutes an ambulance arrived to transport Ben to the nearest hospital. The group collapsed in relief, knowing they had survived the night. At the hospital, doctors worked to stabilize Ben. He required stitches and treatment for blood loss, but was expected to recover fully after several weeks of rest. The incident was reported to park authorities, who commended the group for their quick thinking and bravery. The site was temporarily closed to investigate the bear's behavior and ensure the safety of future visitors. The experience left the friends shaken, but grateful to be alive. They vowed never to underestimate the dangers of the wilderness again, and hoped their story would remind others of the importance of proper preparation and respect for wildlife. On September 10th, 2023, 4 college friends from Seattle, Washington, set out on a hunting trip deep in Alaska's remote wilderness. The group included Ryan Carter, 24, a biology major fascinated by studying wildlife; Emily Harper, 23, an environmental science student and outdoor enthusiast; Tyler Morgan, 25, a seasoned hunter with experience in remote terrains; and Jason Lee, 22, a computer science student, eager for his first outdoor adventure. Their shared love for the outdoors and years of friendship at the University of Washington brought them together for this journey. Their destination was a secluded area near a national park and preserve in southwest Alaska, known for its dense forests, rugged landscapes, and rich wildlife. The group had spent weeks planning this trip, gathering essential supplies such as tents, rifles, first aid kits, and flares. They hoped to hunt small game, explore the untouched terrain, and disconnect from their busy academic lives. Their campsite was carefully chosen, a flat clearing surrounded by towering spruce trees, with a stream nearby providing fresh water. The first day of their trip went smoothly. They hiked through dense trails, spotting moose tracks and eagles soaring above. Tyler shared his hunting knowledge with Jason, who was eager to learn. By evening, they had set up camp, lighting a small fire to keep warm as the temperature dropped. Laughter and stories filled the air as they cooked dinner and marveled at the breathtaking Alaskan night sky. As the night deepened, the forest around them grew eerily quiet, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Tired from the day's adventures, the group retreated to their tents. Tyler and Jason shared one tent, while Ryan and Emily occupied the other. The fire had burned low, its embers glowing faintly in the darkness. Suddenly, a loud snarl shattered the silence. Ryan was the first to stir, and his instincts told him something was wrong. Before he could react, a massive grizzly bear emerged from the shadows, drawn by the scent of their food. The bear roared, charging toward the campsite and clawing at their gear. It tore into the tents within seconds, shredding the fabric with powerful claws. Emily was caught in the bear's path, suffering a deep laceration to her shoulder as the animal struck her while tearing through her tent. Just inches away, Ryan scrambled to pull her out of harm's way. As Tyler and Jason awoke to the chaos, the group quickly grabbed their rifles, fumbling in the darkness to load them. Tyler managed to fire a warning shot into the air, causing the bear to retreat momentarily into the shadows. The attack left the group shaken, and Emily's condition was critical. Her shoulder bled heavily, and the pain was intense, making it difficult for her to move. The bear lingered nearby, its growls echoing through the forest as the friends tried to regroup. They knew they were miles from safety, with no means to call for help and a dangerous predator stalking them. The situation grew dire as the reality of their isolation set in. Tyler and Ryan quickly created a makeshift stretcher from branches and their tent fabric to carry Emily. Jason, though inexperienced, kept a watchful eye on the tree line, ready to fire if the bear returned. The group's bond was tested as fear and exhaustion took hold, but their determination to survive kept them moving. The group knew they had no choice but to leave the campsite immediately. With the bear still nearby, every second felt like a race against time. Tyler and Ryan carefully placed Emily onto the makeshift stretcher, securing her tightly with straps to prevent further injury. Emily's bleeding shoulder continued to soak through the bandages, and her pale face revealed the immense pain she was enduring. Jason carried the flares, his hands trembling as he clutched one in readiness. As they began their trek, the darkness of the Alaskan wilderness enveloped them. The forest seemed alive with sounds, every rustle and snap heightening their sense of vulnerability. Tyler took the lead, his rifle raised and his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for signs of movement. Ryan stayed close to Emily, occasionally checking her condition, while Jason brought up the rear, watching for any sign of the bear. Hours passed, and the group made slow progress through the uneven terrain. The weight of the stretcher and the stress of the situation took a toll on their energy, but they pushed forward, driven by the need to save Emily. Snapping branches and labored breaths echoed through the forest despite their efforts to remain silent. Behind them, the occasional low growl reminded them that the bear was still following. At one point, the bear appeared again, its dark shape emerging from the shadows. Jason quickly ignited a flare, the bright light startling the animal and forcing it to retreat once more. The group used the opportunity to increase their pace, but the constant threat of another attack left them on edge. The journey to their vehicle seemed endless. Emily's condition worsened as her breathing grew shallow, and her consciousness faded in and out. Tyler and Ryan switched places frequently to share the burden of carrying her, their muscles aching from the effort. Jason's inexperience showed as he stumbled often, but his determination to protect his friends kept him moving. As dawn broke, the faint outline of their vehicle came into view. Relief washed over them, but their ordeal was not yet over. They hurriedly loaded Emily into the back seat, using whatever supplies they had left to stabilize her for the drive. Tyler took the wheel, his hands steady despite the exhaustion, while Ryan and Jason stayed close to Emily, keeping her awake and monitoring her condition. The drive to the nearest hospital was grueling, with rough roads and the constant fear that Emily might not make it. Her shoulder injury had caused significant blood loss, and her condition was critical by the time they arrived. Medical staff rushed her into surgery, working tirelessly to save her life. In the days that followed, The group reflected on their experience. Emily survived the attack, but her recovery was slow and painful. The physical scars were a reminder of the ordeal, but the emotional impact lingered longer. Tyler, Ryan, and Jason struggled with guilt and helplessness, though they knew they had done everything possible to protect their friend. The incident sparked discussions among their friends and family about the risks of remote adventures. For Tyler, the experience reinforced the importance of preparation and the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. Jason, despite his lack of knowledge, felt a newfound respect for the outdoors and the dangers it could hold. Ryan, always passionate about wildlife, understood the bear's actions as instinctual, but carried a deeper appreciation for the fine line between human presence and nature. Once recovered, Emily joined her friends in sharing their story to raise awareness about safety in the wild. They emphasized proper communication tools, better planning, and respect for wildlife. Their ordeal became a tale of survival, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of friendship forged in the face of danger. On July 17, 2023, Greg and Laura Thompson, newlyweds from Denver, Colorado, embarked on a much-anticipated camping trip to a national park in the northwest corner of Wyoming. The couple had always shared a passion for the outdoors, often spending their weekends hiking or camping in Colorado's mountainous regions. They decided to visit the national park for their honeymoon, a place they had both dreamed of exploring. The trip was meant to escape city life's bustle and a chance to connect with nature. Greg, 29, worked as a software engineer, while Laura, 27, was a middle school teacher. Both loved the simplicity of camping, falling asleep under the stars and waking to the sounds of the wilderness. They had spent weeks planning this trip, ensuring they had all the necessary gear, including a sturdy tent, cooking supplies, and bear spray. Their campsite was located in a designated area near Madison Junction, a popular spot known for its proximity to wildlife and scenic beauty. The first day of their trip was everything they had hoped for. They hiked along the Madison River, spotting bison in the distance and marveling at the park's geothermal features. That evening, they cooked dinner over a campfire and shared stories about their plans. As night fell, they carefully packed away their food and secured it in a bear-proof cooler, following the park's strict guidelines to minimize the risk of attracting wildlife. The peacefulness of the night was shattered in the early hours of the morning. Greg and Laura were jolted awake by rustling near their campsite. At first, Greg thought it might be the wind, but the noises grew louder and more distinct. Peering out of their tent, they saw a large bear rummaging through their cooler, its powerful claws tearing at the lid. Despite their efforts to store the food properly, the bear had been drawn to their campsite, likely driven by hunger. Greg and Laura quickly realized the seriousness of the situation. They shouted and banged on nearby objects, hoping to scare the bear away. However, their attempts only seemed to agitate the animal further. The bear turned its attention to the tent, its massive frame casting a shadow in the dim light. With a sudden lunge, it tore through the fabric, its claws ripping a gaping hole. Greg tried to shield Laura inside the tent as the bear charged at him. The bear's claws slashed Greg's arm and shoulder, leaving deep wounds that bled profusely. Laura reached for the bear spray as the chaos unfolded, her hands trembling. She aimed the spray at the bear with a determined burst, forcing it to retreat momentarily. The animal growled and backed away, but not before biting Laura's leg. The bite left a severe puncture wound, causing her immense pain as she struggled to stand. Despite their injuries, the couple managed to crawl out of the tent and move toward the edge of the campsite, where they hoped to find safety. Hearing the commotion, nearby campers rushed to help. Their shouts and flashlights finally drove the bear away into the woods. Greg and Laura, weak and shaken, waited as one of the campers called for assistance. Greg and Laura sat on the edge of their campsite, their breaths shallow and labored as they clung to each other for support. The pain from their injuries was becoming unbearable, but they knew they had to stay alert. Greg's wounds on his arm and shoulder continued to bleed heavily, while Laura's leg, bitten deeply, was swollen and throbbing. The nearby campers, who had come to their aid, stayed close, offering comfort and helping them stay calm while they awaited rescue. It wasn't long before the sound of a ranger's vehicle broke through the early morning stillness. The rangers, experienced in handling such emergencies, arrived with medical kits and weapons in case the bear returned. They immediately assessed Greg and Laura's injuries, applying pressure to Greg's wounds to slow the bleeding and wrapping Laura's leg to prevent further blood loss. The couple was then helped into the vehicle, and the rangers transported them to the nearest medical facility within the park. As the vehicle left the campsite, the rangers began tracking the bear. The bear appeared starving and desperate based on Greg and Laura's description and the evidence left behind. This behavior, though not uncommon in late summer when food sources become scarce, highlighted the dangers of human-wildlife interactions in areas like the national park in the northwest corner of Wyoming. The bear had likely been drawn to the campsite by the faint scent of food, despite the couple's efforts to store their supplies properly. At the medical facility, Greg and Laura were treated for their injuries. Greg required several stitches for the deep lacerations on his arm and shoulder, while Laura's leg wound necessitated cleaning and additional sutures. Both were placed under observation to ensure no infections or complications from their injuries. The medical staff commended Laura for her quick thinking and use of bear spray, which likely saved both their lives. Meanwhile, the rangers tracked and located the bear later that day. After confirming its identity through tracks and signs near the campsite, they made the difficult decision to euthanize it. Wildlife experts explained that the bear's behavior was consistent with desperation rather than aggression due to dwindling food sources in its natural habitat. Though necessary to prevent further incidents, this decision sparked debate among park visitors and conservationists. News of the attack spread quickly, drawing attention to the challenges of managing human-wildlife interactions in national parks. Some visitors criticized the couple, questioning whether they had taken every precaution. Others defended them, pointing out that they had followed all recommended guidelines and that the incident was an unfortunate reminder of the risks of visiting such wilderness areas. For Greg and Laura, the experience left physical and emotional scars. They spent weeks recovering from their injuries, attending physical therapy sessions, and learning to cope with the trauma of the attack. Despite the ordeal, they remained grateful to have survived and expressed gratitude to the rangers and campers who had come to their aid. The couple also became advocates for wildlife safety, sharing their stories to educate others about the importance of being prepared and respecting nature. National park officials implemented stricter measures to minimize such encounters in the following months. Campsites were inspected more rigorously, and visitors had to attend mandatory safety briefings before camping in bear-prone areas. Inspired by Greg and Laura's ordeal, these changes aim to protect visitors and wildlife, fostering a safer coexistence. On September 18, 2023, Eric Miller, a 35-year-old environmentalist from Boulder, Colorado, embarked on a solo hike in the breathtaking Rocky Mountains. Eric was no stranger to the outdoors. A passionate advocate for conservation, he spent his weekends exploring trails, collecting data for local wildlife studies, and promoting ecotourism in his community. His dedication to preserving nature earned him respect among environmental groups, but he preferred solitude, finding peace in the unspoiled wilderness. This particular hike was intended to be a personal retreat. Eric had recently completed a major project on sustainable forestry and wanted to reconnect with the environment he worked so hard to protect. Equipped with his whistle, first aid kit, and bear spray, Eric felt prepared for anything the rugged terrain might throw at him. He chose a remote trail near Estes Park, known for its scenic views and abundant wildlife, including deer, elk, and the occasional black or grizzly bear. The morning was crisp and clear as Eric set off, his boots crunching against the gravel path. Towering pines lined the trail, their needles glistening with dew. Eric paused frequently to admire the sights, jotting notes in his field journal about the flora and fauna he encountered. He was thrilled to spot a family of marmots basking on a sunlit rock. As the hours passed, he climbed higher, the air thinning and the views growing more spectacular. Around noon, Eric reached a narrow section of the trail bordered on one side by a steep incline and on the other by dense undergrowth. Here, he spotted fresh bear tracks in the dirt. His heart quickened, but he reminded himself to stay calm. Bears were common in the Rockies, and encounters were usually harmless if proper precautions were taken. He continued walking, his senses heightened. Suddenly, the undergrowth rustled. A large grizzly bear emerged, its dark eyes locking onto Eric. Startled, the bear stood on its hind legs, towering over him. Eric froze, recalling the advice he had given others. Avoid sudden movements and don't run. Slowly, he backed away, hoping to de-escalate the situation. But the bear, feeling threatened, let out a roar and charged. Eric's instincts kicked in. He turned and scrambled toward a nearby tree, hoping to climb to safety. His boots slipped on the loose soil, and before he could gain much height, the bear swiped at him with its powerful claws. Eric was knocked to the ground, the force leaving him dazed as the bear lunged again, raking its claws across his back and legs. Pain shot through his body as he tried to crawl away, his breathing shallow and rapid. Eric reached for the whistle hanging from his backpack strap despite his injuries. He blew it repeatedly, the piercing sound cutting through the forest. The bear hesitated, distracted by the noise, giving Eric a brief moment to assess his situation. He was bleeding heavily, but his mind raced with survival strategies. As the bear growled and circled back, Eric continued to blow the whistle, praying someone would hear him. The wilderness around him felt vast and isolating, the trees seeming to close in as the bear prepared for another attack. Eric's whistle continued to echo through the forest as he clutched his bleeding wounds, struggling to remain conscious. The bear, momentarily distracted, growled and stepped back, its ears twitching as it scanned the surroundings. Eric knew this was his only chance. He crawled toward the nearest tree trunk, each movement sending searing pain through his back and legs. Blood seeped from the deep gashes along his legs and back, leaving a dark trail on the forest floor. As the bear lowered its head to charge again, loud shouts and the clatter of approaching footsteps broke through the tension. A group of nearby hikers, alerted by Eric's whistle, appeared on the trail, armed with sticks and making as much noise as possible. The bear paused, clearly uneasy about the growing commotion. The hikers banged their equipment together and yelled, forcing the animal to retreat further into the underbrush. After a few tense moments, it disappeared entirely into the dense forest. Relief swept over the hikers as they rushed to Eric's side. His shirt was torn, revealing the jagged wounds on his back, and his legs were swollen and bruised from the mauling. One of the hikers, a former medic, quickly assessed his injuries, using a spare shirt to apply pressure to the worst of the bleeding. Another hiker radioed for help using an emergency transceiver, providing their location to rescue teams. Eric's breathing was shallow, but he remained conscious, his determination to survive evident despite the pain. The hikers worked together to make him comfortable while waiting for rescue. After nearly an hour, the sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air signaled the arrival of the rescue team. A paramedic was lowered to the ground, stabilizing Eric and preparing him for airlift. He was pale and weak from blood loss, but his vital signs were stable enough for transport. The team carefully secured him onto a stretcher and hoisted him into the helicopter. Eric was flown to a hospital in Denver, where a team of surgeons worked to repair the damage caused by the attack. Doctors closed multiple deep wounds on his back and legs and treated him for severe blood loss. The road to recovery was long and challenging. Physical therapy became a crucial part of his rehabilitation, as the bear's claws had torn through muscle and tissue, leaving him with limited mobility for months. Despite the trauma, Eric's spirit remained unbroken. From his hospital bed, he began drafting plans to raise awareness about bear safety in hiking areas. He collaborated with local authorities to develop educational programs for hikers, emphasizing the importance of proper precautions and respecting wildlife. The incident sparked significant changes in the park's safety policies. Rangers installed more warning signs on trails known for bear activity and increased patrols during peak hiking seasons. They also held workshops on using bear spray and understanding animal behavior to prevent similar encounters. Eric's story became a symbol of resilience and a reminder of nature's unpredictability. Though scarred physically and emotionally, he chose to use his experience to educate others, ensuring that his ordeal would serve a greater purpose. The hikers who saved him remained in touch, their bond forged by the harrowing events of that day. Together, they shared their story, inspiring countless others to approach the wilderness cautiously and respectfully. The morning of August 5th, 2023, photographer Tara Nguyen, 31, embarked on an ambitious hike through a national park in northwestern Montana. Known for its towering peaks, lush valleys, and diverse wildlife, the park had always been on Tara's list of must-visit locations. As a professional wildlife photographer from Seattle, Washington, Tara specializes in capturing intimate moments of animals in their natural habitats. Her work often highlighted the delicate balance between humans and wildlife, and this trip was part of a larger project to document grizzly bears in the wild. Joining her on this journey was Marcus Brown, a 40-year-old seasoned guide with over 15 years of experience navigating the rugged terrains of the national park. Marcus was well respected for his deep understanding of wildlife behavior and ability to lead safely through unpredictable conditions. He had accompanied photographers, researchers, and adventurers on countless trips, earning a reputation for his calm demeanor and quick thinking. Tara and Marcus set out early from a trailhead near Many Glacier, a region renowned for its abundant wildlife. They planned to trek up a ridge known for grizzly activity, where Tara hoped to capture the bears in their natural environment without disrupting their behavior. Both were well prepared, carrying bear spray, communication devices, and survival gear. Tara's camera, a trusted tool in her line of work, hung securely around her neck as they ascended the steep, rocky trail. The first few hours of the hike were uneventful but rewarding. Tara photographed mountain goats grazing on distant cliffs and marmots darting between the rocks. The trail narrowed as they climbed higher, with sheer drops on one side and dense brush on the other. Marcus led the way, scanning for signs of wildlife while keeping a safe distance from potential danger zones. As they approached a ridge around midday, Marcus suddenly stopped. Just ahead, a massive grizzly bear stood on the trail, focusing on something in the bushes. Tara froze, her heart racing as she realized the gravity of the situation. Marcus signaled for her to stay calm and slowly retreat, but the movement caught the bear's attention. The bear turned toward them, its imposing figure now fully visible. The bear let out a low growl, a clear warning. Marcus and Tara tried to back away further, but the narrowness of the trail left them with limited options. Suddenly, the bear charged. Marcus reached for the bear spray and unleashed it in the bear's direction, but a strong gust of wind blew the spray back toward them, rendering it ineffective. Tara lost her footing in the chaos and fell onto the rocky slope below. The fall left her with a severely sprained ankle, making it nearly impossible for her to walk. Marcus, determined to protect Tara, grabbed her arm and helped her slide further down the slope to escape the bear's reach. The bear stopped at the edge of the ridge, pacing and growling as it assessed the situation. Marcus guided Tara into a gully below, where they found a fallen tree large enough to provide cover. They huddled together, trying to remain silent as the bear lingered above. The following hours were tense, every sound in the forest amplifying their fear that the bear might return. Tara and Marcus remained beneath the fallen tree, their breaths shallow as they tried to stay as still as possible. The bear's growls grew fainter, signaling it was moving further up the ridge. Marcus peered cautiously, his instincts telling him that the bear might not be entirely gone, but was no longer an immediate threat. Despite the reprieve, the danger was far from over. Tara winced as she adjusted her position, her injured ankle throbbing with pain. It was swollen and bruised, making her unable to stand or walk without assistance. Marcus, still alert, whispered reassurances and assessed their situation. They were in a steep gully surrounded by dense brush and rocky terrain, far from the main trail. Nightfall was approaching, and without proper shelter, they faced the added risks of exposure to cold temperatures and other predators. Marcus used his limited supplies to create a makeshift splint for Tara's ankle, fashioning it out of branches and strips of fabric from his backpack. Though it provided some support, Tara's mobility remained severely restricted. The forest around them grew darker, the fading sunlight casting long shadows stretching endlessly. Every rustle in the underbrush sent a wave of tension through them, their minds racing with the possibility that the bear might return. Hours passed in agonizing silence. Tara's mind replayed the events leading up to their predicament and felt fear and disbelief. Despite the pain and anxiety, she was grateful for Marcus's quick thinking and calm presence. His experience as a guide proved to be their lifeline in this precarious situation. At first light, the sound of a distant helicopter broke the stillness of the morning. Marcus activated their emergency beacon at night, hoping rescuers would pick up the signal. Relief washed over them as the helicopter drew closer, its blades cutting through the cold morning air. Marcus used a reflective emergency blanket to signal their location, and within minutes, the rescuers spotted them. Rangers descended into the gully, carefully helping Tara onto a stretcher. Her injuries required immediate medical attention, as the swelling in her ankle had worsened overnight. Marcus, though physically unharmed, showed signs of exhaustion from the ordeal. The rescuers commended his efforts, recognizing that his actions likely saved their lives. Back at the ranger station, Tara received first aid before being transported to a nearby hospital. Doctors confirmed that her ankle was severely sprained, requiring immobilization and weeks of recovery. Despite the pain, Tara was determined to continue her work as a wildlife photographer, using this experience to shed light on the challenges and dangers of capturing nature's raw beauty. The bear was not tracked or euthanized, as rangers determined it had only acted out of instinct and did not pose an ongoing threat. This decision sparked conversations about the delicate balance between human activities and wildlife conservation in areas like the National Park in northwestern Montana. While recovering, Tara wrote about her experience, emphasizing the importance of preparation, respect for wildlife, and the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. The story of Tara and Marcus's survival quickly spread, inspiring admiration for Marcus's bravery and Tara's resilience. Although reluctant to take credit, Marcus was hailed as a hero for his quick actions and unwavering support during the ordeal. For Tara, the incident became a defining moment in her career, reminding her of the fragile connection between humans and the natural world. As she recovered, Tara shared the images she had captured before the encounter, along with her story, raising awareness about the risks faced by photographers and adventurers in wild environments. Her work gained widespread recognition, and she advocated safer practices in wildlife photography, ensuring that others could learn from her harrowing experience. August 2023, Emma and Chris, a married couple from Seattle, embarked on a much-anticipated hiking trip in the Montana wilderness. In their mid-30s, they shared a passion for exploring remote trails and immersing themselves in nature. Emma worked as a graphic designer, while Chris was a teacher. Despite their busy lives, they often made time for weekend getaways, cherishing the peace and beauty of the outdoors. Their latest adventure was meant to be a serene escape from the hustle of city life. The couple chose a trail near a national park in northwestern Montana, known for its breathtaking views of rugged mountains, dense forests, and sparkling rivers. The path was relatively isolated and favored by experienced hikers seeking solitude. Emma and Chris thoroughly researched the trail and packed bear spray, whistles, and a first aid kit to ensure they were prepared for potential wildlife encounters. Though they knew the region's reputation for bear activity, they felt confident in their precautions. On their second day, the couple reached a stunning riverbank surrounded by vibrant wildflowers. They decided to take a break and capture the scenery. Chris set up his camera on a tripod, while Emma wandered a few feet away, marveling at the crystal-clear water. The air was filled with the gentle sound of flowing water and the occasional chirp of birds. It was everything they had hoped for, peaceful and picturesque. They didn't know that a grizzly bear was feeding nearby, hidden by the thick undergrowth along the riverbank. The bear had been startled by their movements and sounds. As Emma approached a cluster of wildflowers for a better photo, the bear emerged from the brush, its massive form suddenly visible. At first, it paused, observing them with wary eyes, but within moments, it charged. Chris yelled to Emma as the bear's thundering steps closed the distance. The couple tried to retreat, but were trapped in a narrow trail bordered by steep, rocky slopes. The bear was relentless, and within seconds it reached Emma, knocking her to the ground. She screamed as the bear swiped at her, leaving deep gashes on her shoulder and back. Desperate to save her, Chris grabbed his walking stick and struck the bear repeatedly. Undeterred by Chris's efforts, the bear focused on Emma, who lay defenseless on the ground. Her arms and legs bore fresh wounds as she tried to shield herself from the powerful swipes. Chris continued to strike the bear, shouting and using everything he could to distract it. After what felt like an eternity, the bear finally stopped its attack, its ears flicking at a sound in the distance. With a low growl, it retreated into the woods, leaving the couple shaken and severely injured. Emma lay on the rocky trail, trembling from pain and fear. Chris dropped his walking stick and rushed to her side. Blood stained her jacket and pants, and her breathing was shallow. He quickly checked her injuries. Emma had deep claw marks on her back and shoulder, along with puncture wounds on her arms and legs. Despite her pain, she managed to whisper that she could move, though every breath seemed to strain her body. Chris knew they had to act fast. The bear could return at any moment and were far from help. He wrapped Emma's wounds with bandages from their first aid kit, using strips of clothing to apply pressure to slow the bleeding. He helped her to her feet with great effort, supporting her weight as they moved slowly down the trail. Every step was agonizing for Emma, but she gritted her teeth and focused on moving forward. The trail, which had seemed beautiful and serene hours earlier, now felt endless and treacherous. Chris constantly glanced behind them, his ears straining for any sound that might signal the bear's return. Emma leaned heavily on him, her face pale and her strength fading. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the forest, and the temperature dropped rapidly. They heard voices in the distance after nearly an hour of slow progress. A group of hikers appeared around a bend, their headlamps cutting through the growing darkness. The group froze at the sight of Emma's bloodied figure, but Chris quickly explained what had happened. The hikers sprang into action, offering their jackets to keep Emma warm and helping to stabilize her wounds further. One of the hikers had a satellite phone and immediately called for help. The group decided to stay together, forming a protective circle around Emma and Chris as they waited. Every rustle in the bushes made their hearts race, but the bear did not return. The wait felt like an eternity, but eventually the sound of a helicopter broke the silence. Search and rescue personnel arrived, and Emma was carefully lifted onto a stretcher. The helicopter flew them to the nearest hospital, where Emma underwent hours of surgery to treat her wounds. Doctors were amazed at her resilience, noting that she was lucky to be alive. Though physically unhurt, Chris carried the emotional weight of the ordeal, staying by Emma's side throughout her recovery. The attack left both of them shaken, but it also raised awareness of the dangers of hiking in bear territory. Park officials reviewed the incident and implemented stricter guidelines for hikers, including enhanced safety measures and more prominent warnings about wildlife encounters. Emma and Chris later shared their story with local media, hoping to educate others about the importance of preparation and respect for nature. Emma's injuries included multiple deep gashes and puncture wounds, requiring extensive treatment, but she ultimately made a full recovery. Though the memories of the attack will remain with them forever, Emma and Chris choose to focus on their survival and the lessons they have learned in the wilderness.